Good morning, friends. Today we will be discussing Max Weber's concept of power. Primarily, we will be relying on two books. From Max Weber, edited by Garth and Mills, and second, we will also take help of Weber's Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. Before we discuss the concept of power in Max Weber, let me introduce two recent books which tries to locate the academic identity of Max Weber. One book is written by William Peterson. It was published in 2004. The title is Against the Stream. Second book is by Peter Burke. It was published in 1992, and the title is History and Social Theory. In both the books, we have the same identity of Max Weber, and their ideas of Weberian scholarship is based on Weber's own assertion. Weber never saw himself as a sociologist. Rather, he always asserted his primary identity as a historian, although his writings are taught in political science and sociology and economics as well. His works in jurisprudence is also noteworthy, but in his own eyes, as Peter Burke and William Peterson claims, he was primarily a historian of capitalism as well as the historian of the modern world, although he wrote books on medieval and ancient periods as well. Second thing which I had already hinted in my earlier lectures is that we do not find in Weber references to society as a whole, whether in terms of modes of production or the Durkheimian society, as something which exist over and above individuals. But nor do we find the individual stories that one might expect from Weber's methodology. There is an unexpected determinism in his account of modern societies. The key of all this, is his notion of rationality, which brings together the merit of individual actions into recognizable patterns and also makes sense, at least, of modern history as a process of rationalization. Max Weber was certainly not a formal theorist like Emile Durkheim or Karl Marx. But it cannot be denied that he was a great substantive theorist in sociology of law, sociology of economic life, political sociology, as well as sociology of religion. According to Talcott Parsons, the main translator and interpreter of Max Weber until 1951, Weber is not trying to provide an economic theory in his book, The Theory of Social and Economic Organization, originally published in German in 1922 and translated into 1947. Talcott Parsons is writing in the introduction of this book, which he himself translated, The Theory of Social and Economic Organization. And as you know, both Garth and Mills are American sociologists, although they differ from Talcott Parsons, particularly C. Wright Mills, but it cannot be denied that the translation project of the book, which is translated and compiled and edited by Garth and Mills, was sponsored by Talcott Parsons. Therefore, Talcott Parsons emerged as the chief interpreter or the authoritative interpreter of Max Weber in the English-speaking world until 1951. This book was translated by Talcott Parsons in 1947. Earlier, he had already translated and published The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism into the English language. Okay, now as Parsons is claiming in this book, the theory of social and economic organization, Weber is not trying to provide an economic theory, rather, Weber is trying to do something which modern economists generally do not do, that is, offer a theory of the institutions that are involved in the capitalist economy. Weber assumes first that social structures are inherently unstable and variable, and second, that the rationalization and the dominance of the capitalist spirit are an ongoing process. In other words, capitalist spirit is an attitude to life which sees the accumulation of capital. What is capital? Surplus money for investment in the market or production of a new product. Therefore, uh, let us repeat. According to Max Weber, capitalist spirit is an attitude to life which sees the accumulation of capital in a rational and systematic way as the most important value around which daily life should be systematically organized at the expense of pleasure and relaxation. I will repeat again because this is terribly important to understand Max Weber's sociology of power. Capitalist spirit is an attitude to life which sees the accumulation of capital in a rational and systematic way as the most important value around which daily life should be systematically organized at the expense of pleasure and relaxation. Weber calls uh, this worldly asceticism. This worldly asceticism primarily an attitude represented by John Calvin's version of Protestant Reformation of the Christian Church in Europe and their colonies, which are usually referred as the New World. This is the first point to understand the Weberian concept of power, and I have titled this as point A. Now, point B, according to Max Weber, this worldly asceticism is the first salient feature of European modernity, which promotes the capitalist spirit. According to Weber, the second spirit of capitalism as well as European modernity is the institutionalized concept of money and market. We had seen in our lecture yesterday where Marx was referring to the institution of market in the writings of classical political economists like Adam Smith. Marx was already dead in 1883, and Weber was writing almost 40 years after his death. At least the English translations of Max Weber's work provided by Parsons and his colleagues came almost 40 years after the death of Karl Marx. Therefore, Weber did not bother to give his own account of the institution of market, but he had something profound to say about the institutionalized concept of money in classical political economy. And he asserts, and this is my point B, that the use of money broadens the possibility of exchange and widens the scope for planning, rational calculation, and increasing wealth. Point C. Weber makes the distinction between formal and substantive rationality. One, formal or instrumental rationality refers to a situation where rational calculation is possible. It refers only to calculability of the most efficient means to accumulate the capital or profit as an end, means and end. Number two, substantive rationality refers to a situation where a group is provided goods which meets its needs. In this type of rationality, absolute values enter in. Weber says that substantive rationality cannot be understood simply in terms of rational calculation. Rather, it concerns the things we value. In other words, formal or instrumental rationality is restricted to choosing the most efficient means to satisfy the end of accumulating capital or profit or wealth as the ultimate value. On the other hand, substantive rationality is that rationality where people try to choose the most rational end or the most rational value of their life. And according to Max Weber, it is very difficult to study substantive rationality. Therefore, we should not try to do the impossible. Rather, we should restrict our academic inquiry to study only the instrumental or the formal rationality of choosing the most efficient, the most profitable, the most wealth accumulating means or the medium to satisfy their greed of accumulating wealth. Third, Weber said that given our methodology, which he outlined in Methodology of Social Sciences, we can only study formal rationality in a capitalist economy or a liberal democratic nation state. In other words, Weber is saying that I am not denying that one can study substantive rationality, but if you follow Verstehen approach or the methodology of social science, which I have outlined as the most rational method to study human society, you can only study formal or instrumental rationality, and in this way only formal and instrumental power. You cannot study substantive rationality or substantive power in modern society. In other words, unlike Durkheim and Karl Marx, who gave more importance to ontology that is the theory of reality, Weber is trying to give more importance to epistemology and methodology, that is the theory of knowledge and the method to acquire that knowledge about the reality, not as it is, but as it appears through our concepts generated by our epistemology and our methodology. I think you have understood that Weber is a very smart advocate of capitalist mode of production and liberal democratic state. Now let us come to point D. According to Max Weber, class status groups, political party, and corporate groups. These four groups are focused around or oriented towards power as an independent point of conflict. Each represents an aspect of and a basis for power. As Marx had said, the advocates of free market, liberal democracy, and capitalist mode of production, that they take private property and selfish motive to accumulate wealth as the ultimate value or as an aspect of human nature as a species being. Max Weber is no exception. As an advocate of free market and capitalist mode of production, Weber also believed that only accumulation of wealth and profit in material terms is the ultimate goal of rational man in modern industrial and democratic society of the civilized world in Western Europe and the New World. In case you understand the Weberian concept I just outlined, it is clear that it is not Marx who can be said as a materialist. Rather, it is Max Weber and people like who are materialists, and Marx is just trying to provide an academic understanding of the materialist dominance in human history. In Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, Weber had already transformed the traditional European, that is Catholic European concept of time and worship in the profane concept of money and factory work by quoting the Calvinist theologian of United States of America, Benjamin Franklin, quotes Benjamin Franklin that time is money, and second, work is worship. In the same spirit, Weber transformed the traditional Catholic concept of space as sacred into the profane concept of city space in his book, The City. As a result, in the name of secular canon, he provided the Calvinist Protestant terminologies of time, space, work, neighborhood, and power in his books like The City, Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, and also the book I just quoted, Economic and the Theory of Social and Economic Organization, as well as his magnum opus, Economy and Society. As I said earlier, his English translations until 1951 were monopolized by Talcott Parsons and his devout followers. They tried to convert the entire world into the followers of Protestant theology of John Calvin. His Marxist opponents understood Parsons' power game and tried to give a fitting reply by converting at least half of the world into Marxism. In this context, Calvinist historian Arnold Toynbee is right in claiming that Marxism is a new religion, at least after the Second World War, which is a new synthesis of secular Judaism. Judaism is the religion of the Jews. I am repeating, Protestant or Calvinist historian Arnold Toynbee is right in claiming that Marxism is a new religion, which is a new synthesis of secular Judaism and secular Orthodox Christianity of Russia. But he did not disclose that Marxist theorists are also right when they claim that secularism in Western Europe and the New World is also a religion which is rooted in Protestant theology of Calvin, Luther, and Zwingli. As a result, we see a war of the new religions, namely secularism of liberal democratic world and Marxism of the second world, uh, at least during the Cold War, that is from 1945 to 1989. Now, let us come to point E. Max Weber has the following to say, that in Western Europe and the New World, there are classes, status groups, political parties, and corporate groups, and these four represent an aspect of and the basis for power. Number one, Weberian concept of class and corporate groups have much in common. Class is defined by Max Weber as well as Karl Marx, more or less in similar ways. Both define caste by using both define class by using the same criteria of ownership of property. Max Weber says class is defined by ownership of property in particular and means of production in general. The ownership of property confers a real power on the employer, and lack of ownership of property confers a real powerlessness on the worker. Worker is compelled to work. Weber does not talk about wage slavery, but he does talk about wage ship. At this point, similarity or commonality ends between Marx and Max Weber. Weber said that all workers who do not own property do not come under one class of proletariat, as Marx asserts. Rather, they, that is, workers who do not own property, may lead to two different classes of lower class of workers as well as the middle class of workers. And we understand the Weberian criteria to define social class. In contrast to the economic class of Karl Marx, we come to at least 4 or 5 social classes, whereas in the writings of Marx, there is only 3 economic class: the bourgeois or the ruling class, the proletariat or the working class, and the lumpen proletariat, which is some sort of intermediary class between the working labor class and the bourgeois ruling class. Weber refined his concept of class in terms of a group of people who shared the same typical chains for supply of goods, external living conditions, and personal life experiences, insofar as this chance is determined by the power to dispose of goods or skills for the sake of income in a given economic order. Class situation is, according to Weber, ultimately market situation. This is from the book Theory of Social and Economic Organization, published in 1922, translated in 1947, primarily pages 181 and 82. In the last book which Weber wrote and which was published in 1925 and translated in 1978, namely Economy and Society in 2 volumes. Weber talks about classes developing as solidary or solidary as opposed to associative organizations, which is closer to the way Marx saw the working class, if not the other classes, as a community. This occurs, according to Weber, when a group shares the chances of moving between a limited number of class positions, but moving into a wider range of positions is blocked by power differentials. Weber saw the first decade of 20th century, the working class, the petty bourgeoisie, the intelligentsia, and a specialist, and classes privileged by property and education. Thus, in contrast to Marx, who said that ultimately there will be only two classes in developed capitalist society, the bourgeois and the proletariat, and the third class, lumpen proletariat, will wither away. Weber discusses the existence of at least 5 classes. Number 1, the working class. Number 2, the petty bourgeoisie. Number 3, the intelligentsia. Number 4, the specialists. Number 5, the classes privileged by property and education. Then Weber discusses about the second source of power in addition to the first source, class, that is status groups. The status groups are those groups who may not have power by owning the property or means of productions. Rather, these groups have a status or social honor. Although a status goes with the possession of material wealth, but it is an autonomous focus for conflict over power. A status situation refers to that part of a person's life, chances, which are decided by the social esteem in which he or she is held. Such esteem might be positive or negative. Along with the social esteem in a status group, a specific lifestyle and restrictions on social contract is also found. These lifestyles and restrictions are not subordinated to economic interests. For example, the Roman Catholic priests and Orthodox Jewish communities are good illustrations of status groups. The Roman Catholic priests wear distinctive clothes. They live according to distinctive rules and they do not marry. The Orthodox Jewish communities marry, but their marriage is prescribed within the group by elaborate rules. There is usually a monopoly of ideal or material goods, which is part and parcel of the stratification by status. For example, in 19th century Britain, there was a sharp distinction in British upper class circles between old and new money. The impoverished aristocrat of a renowned and once powerful family might receive much more esteem and respect than the newly rich industrialist. And there is usually a trend was historically reported that the newly rich industrialists in 19th century British society would wish their children to marry into the former old royal families who may be less rich at the moment, but once they were powerful and renowned. According to Max Weber, the neo-rich may have more power, but the old rich may have more status, both in the society as well as in the market. And although the powerful new rich people tried to gain more status by marrying their children, in the older group, which had both power and status once upon a time, but now they have less power but more status. Weber says that it usually did not give the neo rich more status because by using your wealth, your property, your power in the market, you can force less powerful to dance at your tune. Therefore, Weber said, power is taken at the cost of the powerless, but status is not taken by the concerned party. Rather, it is a self-esteem or honor which is voluntarily or freely given out of respect or esteem. Therefore, in Weberian sociology, there is no doubt that power and status are two different types of conceptual concepts which are attached with the neo rich and the old rich, and both the status and power can be summarized in two ways. Number one, the power is invested in the market as well as in the society primarily by those who own the property or wealth or means of production. Weber calls them corporate groups, and these corporate groups have the ultimate power in the market, and to a large extent they share the power in the political domain of society as well, with another group of people who control the political parties in that society. Therefore, according to Max Weber, there are four sources of power. One is the category of class. Second is the category of a status. Third is the category of political party. and the fourth is the category of corporate groups. But in case we analyze the corporate groups are part of the class system because they own the wealth, the property, the means of productions. Therefore, the upper class or the ruling class is the constituent of the corporate groups, and the status groups represent the old aristocracy or the religious priestly class. It may also include people of intelligentsia and specialists who may get less salary or who may have less income than the bourgeoisie or the ruling class, but who may have more status or a higher status in contrast to the corporate groups or the rich bourgeoisie. So far as political parties are concerned, usually political parties like the social classes in the market are an independent variable of power and status. Usually, the ruling party of a nation state has more power, but the opposition parties also have their own style of power. There are some people within the political parties who may not be exercising power directly, but who may be respected not only by their own partymen and the opposition party, but also by people at large, because they represent the high ideals and exemplary behavior in the political domain, which is difficult to attain by normal politicians. We end here today, and in the next class we will deal with the three concepts of power, domination, and authority, and the three types of authority: the traditional authority, the rational legal authority, and the charismatic authority. Thank you for today.